Now, let's take you to Germany, where elections are taking place this weekend as they seek a successor for Angela Merkel, who's ending her term soon. Now, the DW's Thomas Sparrow is joining us from Berlin for the build-up. Thomas, thanks for your time. Why is this election in Germany so important?
This election is particularly important because it marks the end of an era, 16 years of Angela Merkel as German chancellor, and it marks as well the beginning of a new era for Germany and for Europe. This might sound normal, but it's certainly not how things usually work here in Germany, where power is defended or lost at the ballot box. But Chancellor Angela Merkel had already decided in 2018 that she would not be a candidate again this time round. So this makes this election unique, very different. Another element that makes it very important is the fact that it's so unpredictable. Until now, the three major parties have led opinion polls at a certain time, but the differences are very small. And no one would actually want to predict what will happen on Sunday when 60 million Germans go to the polls. So all this makes this election not only very interesting and very important, but also very exciting for people who are interested in what happens in this part of the world.
Now, Thomas, talk to us about the main candidates vying to replace Angela Merkel.
There are three candidates that are hoping to replace Angela Merkel as Chancellor once the new coalition government is formed. On the one hand, Armin Laschet, who's the Chancellor candidate for Angela Merkel's Conservative bloc and who would probably continue with some of Angela Merkel's centrist policies. Armin Laschet, however, has suffered recently in the polls, and many here in Germany do not believe that he would be the ideal candidate to replace Merkel. Then there's Annalena Baerbock, the surprising Chancellor candidate for the Greens. Annalena Baerbock and her Green Party actually also led the polls, specifically at the beginning of the campaign in the spring, but she as well has suffered recently in the polls, and it seems unlikely that the Greens would be in a capacity to lead the next German government. And then there's the Social Democrats, who were in a very deep crisis a few years ago, but that now have taken pole position and are now the favorites to lead Germany's next government, in particular considering that Olaf Scholz, their Chancellor candidate, is seen by most Germans as the ideal candidate to lead Germany in this new era. However, it's important to stress that Germans do not elect their Chancellor directly. Germans instead vote for parties who then have to form coalitions, and as a result of that formation of a coalition, the new chancellor is decided. So although the three chancellor candidates certainly play a very important role in voting and what parties people vote for here in Germany, it is ultimately the parties and the coalition formation that decide who will be in power in the next 4 years here in Germany.
Right. Now, Thomas, let's situate this. What does this mean for Africa?
This election is not only being followed closely by 60 million Germans that are entitled to vote on Sunday, but also by Germany's international allies that are interested in knowing what direction Germany will take in the next 4 years. Germany, after all, is seen as Europe's powerhouse and plays a key role in relations towards China, towards Russia, towards the United States when it comes to a European Union perspective. And for Africa, it is also relevant. Africa has played an important role under Angela Merkel, especially in her last term in office, not only when it comes to migration or peace and stability, for example, in the Sahel region, but also when it comes to economic cooperation. You may know that Germany launched in 2017, during its G20 presidency, the so-called Compact with Africa program. Its goal is precisely to enhance economic cooperation with Africa, and it has brought together 12 African countries with European governments and international organizations. It is still unclear to what extent a new German government would continue with these kinds of initiatives, but experts have pointed out that Africa will probably continue to play a very important role in Germany's foreign policy when it comes to this new era that is beginning.
The winner is still to be seen, but when will the new government be expected to start working?
One of the most important questions about Germany's election is when the next government will actually start to work. And in that case, it's important to also give some context on how the political system works here in Germany, because the election on Sunday is not the end of a process, but the beginning of a process. And that process that will begin after Sunday's vote is the formation of a new coalition government. What this essentially means is that political parties, depending on the result that they receive on Sunday, will sit down, try and find compromises, and then ultimately sign a coalition government with all the key policies that they plan to bring forward in the next 4 years. This is a very difficult process, also a process that can take a long time. You may remember that Angela Merkel took 5 months to form a new coalition after last election in 2017. So basically what will happen in the next few months is that German political parties and German politicians will be focusing on this formation of a new coalition. It is probable that very little big decisions will actually be taken, and until that coalition is actually formed, Angela Merkel and her government will continue as in a caretaker capacity here in Berlin. So it will be interesting to see not only what result we will see on Sunday, but also what happens afterwards, how parties come together or don't come together to try and form the coalition that will lead Germany in the next 4 years.
Finally, Thomas, we're about to see the end of an era. How is Germany discussing the legacy of Angela Merkel?
Angela Merkel will only leave the German chancellery here in Berlin once a new coalition government is formed. And because it marks the end of an era, there are a lot of discussions here in Germany about Angela Merkel's legacy, not only here in Germany, but also internationally. And there are certainly different views when it comes to what Merkel achieved or what she didn't achieve, both internationally as one of the world's most important politicians, but also nationally as Germany's head of government. Internationally, Angela Merkel is certainly seen as a very relevant politician, a politician that had to deal with many international crises, from the financial crisis to the Eurozone crisis to the migration crisis, and now obviously also the pandemic most recently. And Angela Merkel is certainly seen also as a politician whose views and opinions were taken very seriously, not only as Europe's most important leader, but also more generally on the international stage. Here in Germany, there is a more nuanced view on her legacy. Germans do recognize that Angela Merkel managed to increase Germany's standing internationally, and that reveals to a large extent why she is still seen as Germany's most popular politician, as an anchor of stability. But at the same time, many Germans acknowledge that there are still many things that need to be done, that her legacy is not necessarily complete, that she didn't achieve all the goals that she had set herself in the first place. One example, climate protection. Even Merkel herself acknowledged that more needs to be done if Germany is to achieve its climate protection goals. The same applies to migration, a very difficult debate here in Germany, where some view it positively and some view it very critically. All in all, Germans will probably remember Angela Merkel as a chancellor who brought stability to the country, but that also had certain challenges and certain goals that she did not fulfill completely.
Thomas Sparrow, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for making the time to speak to us.